There it goes. Awesome. All right. Welcome back to Protect You Radio. Between technical difficulties and operator error from John, that's a typical week here at Protect You. So we've lost Candy. She's up in the mountains somewhere on vacation. Travis and Ben, probably golly knows where somebody probably kidnapped them and finally put an end to them. And not many people be sad. So anyways, we got Marion and myself tonight, which is more than enough. Marion,
all right.
Marion from Well Armed Woman with us again this week. And again, she's poor woman regrets it every time we bring her into the show. But
I do. I have to put up with a delicate flower, you know.
I don't know how you do it every week between the Wilcoxes and me and Candy over there just being quiet when she's here and piping up every
Yeah, she's quiet.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe on this show, but not elsewhere. Please, maybe try it. That's funny. So, Marion, you and I were talking a little bit before we jumped on the show, and a lot of stuff going on in the news. Correct? What was on your mind? What are you seeing this week?
Well, it's just the riots are still going on, different places. The tearing down statues, and it just seems like, and there's police that are not departments that aren't getting funded, and that means that there going to be no police, which you better have your gun loaded.
Yeah,
and kudos by.
That's, what is Atlanta, right? They're the ones who are all calling in and like, nope, we're not coming to work.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. That whole, that Wendy's thing. So I guess they set that Wendy's on fire where the one shooting took place. That's nuts. And then yesterday, I think I saw they were setting up roadblocks, like the citizens were setting up roadblocks, so the police weren't coming to help them, they said. So there's armed guards outside this Wendy's with roadblocks.
Yeah.
Am I missing something? If we just decided that cities we're just going to give them up to whoever wants to arm themselves and build roadblocks?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people carrying around, on the news, ARs and, whatever they got, making a stance.
I understand it, but there's a balance there, I guess. If you're going to start tearing up stores and shooting police officers and stuff, it's a different ball game. As opposed to somebody's coming to our town and going to jack it up and we're going to take care of it. It's there's a fine line there, and I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
It's a crazy time.
It is.
I didn't grow up in the the riots in the 60s and stuff, but this to me seems very parallel. The whole Chicago thing and what was it?
Yep.
Was it Republican or Democrat? It was a Democratic convention, right? That they tore it up in Chicago. This, from what I've read in history, this is very parallel to that.
It is. Chicago, like last weekend, they had like over 100 shootings or something like that. It's just, and I can't remember how many deaths, but it's just unbelievable.
Right. And that wasn't protest related, right? That was just typical.
No, this is just regular.
Yeah, that's insane.
And there's is it New York? There's another town, I think it's New York City, that's having the same issue.
That's crazy. Who would have thought we'd get to this? I had not a clue. Not a clue that we would go into a summer like this. I'm just glad it's not real hot. Had it been really hot, I think people would be even crazier because weather tends to affect that kind of stuff. So
yes,
we'll have to see. And then the Flynn case, that's interesting.
Yep.
Sounds like they're going to drop his case. So I think the more you read and the more they get their hands on notes and stuff, that they really railroaded that dude. They ruined his life.
Yeah, they did.
Because they wanted to, prove a political point. And that just terrifies me that they can quickly just turn your world upside down over false claims. That's nuts.
Right.
They wonder why people want to arm themselves.
Yeah, I know.
It's I understand why people are pissed off, and it's a lot of craziness. But again, you got to find that balance of violence versus protest, I guess. But
and the gun sales are still like going up and up and up. It's you go into a gun store and they have hardly anything to pick from. The manufacturers can't make the guns fast enough, and the shops call to get an order, and they hang up on them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Have you been into your local stores lately?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, how bad?
Bad.
Yeah. I saw it. Was it, I think Dave Spalding posted a picture. He went into a store near him. And if you guys aren't familiar, Dave Spalding's a pretty well-known instructor nationally, and he works out of Ohio here. In the picture, it might have been Cabela's or maybe one of the bigger stores like that, and the cases were empty. I mean, there was
Yeah.
nothing. And then
Yeah.
somebody else posted that they were hearing people come into the store. They would grab whatever ammunition was available and ask if there was a gun that matched it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were like, well, the only thing we have is 32. We don't have a lot of 32 guns to match the ammo. I was like, yeah, who even has 32? Who carries a 32? Who even buys a
Yeah.
32 now? I've never owned one. So,
I mean, it's so scary because we have all these new shooters and they don't know anything, you
yeah,
know?
terrifying.
I had a girl call me yesterday. She saw my information somewhere, and she does have her CCW, but she has a revolver. She doesn't carry it, and it sounds like she just shot it when she got her CCW.
In her backyard.
Yeah, I don't know where, but
Well, yeah, somebody called me last week. They saw my information somewhere, but I'm pretty sure Ben put it on a bathroom wall, so it was a different call. So, whole different thing, whole different
yeah,
topic. So, yeah, it's we talked about this. Was it last week before, about how many people are buying guns and just hey, making myself feel safe, but never shot it before and not sure what I'm
yep,
going to do. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of calls too, and they even the gun stores I've been teaching for, they're kind of ramping up their classes and teaching more of them. And yeah, people are coming out of the woodwork, which again, I'm glad that they're calling and getting the training. The other folks I'm again terrified of. And
I know.
are they going to open carry? Are they just going to keep it in their sock drawer? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little
Never.
scary.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yes, and at some point they may end up on a range with you.
Yeah, I know.
Next to you, behind you. Yeah, you just don't know what you're going to get when you go to the range. It's
Be aware.
yeah, and you know what? Awareness goes a long way. Even
It does.
like, hey, I'm at a gun range. I should be safe. Absolutely. That's funny. Oh, and here we are. We get a text from Ben. And he said he's in Missouri with his AR, his MP5, 3 pistols, and a shotty. And I'm going to say, and a laptop? Because that's what he promised me. He was going to take his laptop with him. Jerk. He's probably drunk.
Probably.
That's awesome. I love it. So what else? Anything else you see in the news this week, Marion, that makes you cringe a little bit?
No, there's just, so much going on out there. It's hard to take it all in and keep track of it all.
I'm with you because I try to remember what city is doing what and who's.
I know.
Like I saw another thing about people taking over a city block, and I assumed it was the Chaz or Chop, whatever the hell they're calling it this week. It was Portland.
Yeah.
Something happened in Portland. They tried to take over, and the police rolled in on that one like, oh, hell no. They tore that one up. Maybe like that's what you need to do with those.
It's last week I had the well-armed woman down at Canton, the Stark group, and we shot down there at North American, I think it is. It's a nice range down there.
Is that the one where you guys were shooting steel?
No, no, that's KC's. We shoot steel.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys use quite a few different places down there,
huh? Candy doesn't come to the start chapter. It's just that's where I started, so I try to get down there as much as I can. I know a lot of the girls.
That's nice. You guys are so cordial and fun. I love it. Be more camaraderie like that in the gun community, but we all hate each other and talk bad. It's strange. I've never seen anything like that. I watch these national instructors rip each other apart. I'm like, what's wrong with you guys? Get over it and get over yourself.
Yeah, really.
Just kumbaya. Jeez, oh Pete. Kuna Matata. Let's all be friends. Can we all get along? Oh, it's the wrong guy. Never mind. Anyways. So we were going to jump into, and Ben says he's with his mom and his sister and he's not going to be on. And I said, XXOO. All right. Well, it's just you and me and we will tear it up. I like it. So one of the big topics we were going to try to get into this week, gun control and racism. So racism seems to be a hot topic.
It does.
And it's, probably long overdue that we start looking at some of this stuff a little closer. And I thought, heck, there is probably some racism in our little industry here and in the nation pretty much, it's been going on for a long time. So, I'm trying to keep up with everything. I'm trying to look at myself and go, John, do you do some stuff that's stupid? And are there some things that, are you
Not
prejudiced?
you.
Well, yeah, well, stupid, yes. I try to stay away from being racist. I try to stay away from being prejudiced. I try to stay away from being a bigot. Now, I will tell you, there are probably times that I might be prejudiced. I'm not going to lie. There are things that I probably grew up around and go, huh, I did those things when I was younger, and they probably come off as prejudiced. And some people will probably accuse me of being prejudiced because I do profile. Now, when I say I profile, I don't do it based on skin color. There might be some socioeconomic stuff in there. I usually do it based on, haven't seen you in my area before, and you don't look like you belong here, and I'm going to watch you a little bit closer. Again, doesn't have to do with skin color, but, who knows? So I just throw that out there early on so people kind of see where John's coming from and how crazy he can be sometimes. So what do you think, Mary? Do you think there's some racism in gun control in our industry?
Um,
And don't hold back. Feel free to jump in, throw it out there. We'll talk about it. I ain't scared.
yeah, I don't see a whole lot of it on my end. I think it may prevent like some people of color to come into the well-armed woman because they're afraid to. But then, I have Candy. She covers that.
Yeah, Candy's not afraid of anything.
No. So, I don't see a whole lot of it in the gun industry, but, as far as the cops and the shootings, yeah, I do.
Yeah, and there might be some there. I see the stat. I hear people talk about that. African Americans are shot more, and people of color are shot in
Right.
more than by police. But some of the stats I've seen, unless I'm misunderstanding them, it's not necessarily true. So maybe I'm looking at the stats wrong. But it's something I'm going to dig deeper into to kind of see. And if it is true, then no, absolutely. There needs to be some pushback.
On the other hand, you've got, when somebody says stop, put your hands up, you stop and put your hands up.
Yes. And I agree with that 100%. And I tend to tell people in my classes that. So this is funny because I really want to reach out. There's a training counselor who I kind of trust. And I've had a lot of this in my classes over the last year. And honestly, I kind of blew it off because I kept hearing, well, you don't understand, John, because you're not African-American. And I was like, you're right, you guys, I don't get it. Is there really that going on? And I keep hearing these stories, and I keep hearing story after story. And then I threw out there, just listen during the stop. And I would get real serious pushback on this. Like, no, John, you don't understand. I absolutely don't. You're absolutely right. I have not had to live that. I've always lived my life as a white middle-class male. Well, I take it back. Lower class income-wise male early on. So, I ran into some classism, but I can change that. I dug out of that. You can't dig out of your skin color. So, it's not something I can speak to that greatly, but yeah, you're right. I really followed that and really thought that for the longest time was just listen. And then you see videos like the, oh gosh, is it Philandro Castile? I mean, that dude got shot for zero reason. He's in there with his girlfriend, and the guy just, I'd have to go back and look at the video again, but from what I remember with that dude was just kind of not really doing a whole lot and got shot. And then there's the guy who, was that South Carolina, North Carolina? He was running away from the officer, and the officer, I think, tased him and then shot him in the back. Now this goes back a year or two, and they convicted that cop. But wow, that's are those outliers? Maybe not. Maybe there is some racism, and I know too many police officers where I would say that is prevalent in police departments, not from the people I know. Was it Baltimore's police department who just got chastised and beat up so bad? 53% of their officers are African American. So I can't imagine there's a whole lot of racism going on inside of that department if that department's that big. And again, I don't know. There very well could be.
Right.
And I think overall, like government wise and some of the roots of racism and gun control, as I started to look into this week, I was really, really bizarre spin to this. I was like, gosh, maybe. And the more you look at it, yeah, there was a lot of laws and stuff that were put out there basically to keep lower class and African Americans and Indians and all kinds of people from owning firearms. Free slaves and stuff. They passed all kinds of crazy laws.
Yeah.
In one that everyone's starting to talk about Joe Biden being a racist. Not a fan of Joe Biden's at all by any means. But a year ago, I'd have been like, "What? Joe Biden's not a racist. Give me a break. The guy just, he's just dumb." But the more I look at some of this stuff, I go, this dude might actually. I mean, I think at a minimum, he's a segregationist from back in the day, and I really think that he might have some pretty deep racist roots in his blood. And I don't want to say he doesn't know better because he is dumb, but the whole busing thing. Did you ever see this about the quote he said back when they started to desegregate schools?
No.
So here's a quote, and I'm thinking, no, this can't be a real quote. Somebody made this quote up. So I even went to Snopes. Snopes is going to defend the guy. They put this down as true. So here, this quote says, "Unless we do something about this, my children are going to grow up in a jungle. The jungle being a racial jungle with tension having to build so high that's going to explode at some point. We've got to make some move on this." What? Are you
Wow.
really? Yeah, right.
Really?
Marion, that was the same thing I said. I was like, did that really come out of his mouth? So yeah, I don't know how else you explain that quote.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand schools are jungles, but man, that's some pretty serious wording. Was it about 1979-ish that came out of his mouth? So this dude's been on a roll for a long time with this kind of crap. He's nuts. So,
and he's getting nuttier.
He is. I think there might be some dementia there, but
yeah,
who knows? So this is another guy who kind of bragged about his relationship with Strom Thurmond. Talk about a segregationist and racist. That dude is about as racist as you can get. But they had a pretty tight relationship, and I think he looked at him almost as a mentor. So that's, again, I'm like, okay, I realize you work in Congress and Senate and stuff, and you're dealing with people on a daily basis you got to kind of get along with. But he was probably a little too close to Strom as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And then he wrote that crime bill back in the 90s that probably caused more mass incarceration of African Americans than probably anything anyone's done in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was his quote? He was on a podcast with is it Charlemagne the God, I think is the rapper, and his quote, that was the famous, if you vote for Trump you ain't black. Holy cow. What? Are you insane? That dude has lost his freaking mind.
Yeah, he is.
The more I look at the stuff he says and does, and I look at his anti-crime bill and his gun control issues, I'm beginning to think this guy may actually look at gun control as a way to control inner city youth and African Americans and strip them of their rights. I'm like, what? Huh?
Yeah.
I might be out of my mind and grasping for straws, but the more I look at that, I'm like, wow, this isn't just a gun control thing. Possibly this is almost like an elitist. We're better than you. This is the same dummy. What was his? He threw another quote out there. Someday, how did he put this? Something about someday poor kids will be as smart as white kids. Something along those lines. I gotta go look the quote back up. And I was like, so who is he saying? If poor kids? Who's the poor kids?
Yeah.
Is that everyone except white kids? So anyone who's not white is poor and dumb? Is that? I was baffled. The more I look at this guy, and I go, man, gun control in his mind might actually be.
Yeah, you shake your head.
Yeah, baffling, man. Then I started looking at some things back through history where I was like, so where did racism and gun control kind of butt heads and kind of cross a line? Do you remember the Black Panthers?
Yeah.
So probably what, mid 60s, early 60s, later 60s. So the more I read about these guys, they were probably one of the earliest advocates for gun rights and open carry. So this whole thing that they used back in California, so they snagged the loopholes in California law and really push the limits of open carry, especially with loaded firearms. So there were laws on the books, about concealed carry and stuff, and carrying guns. They found a way around it back in the day, and I was laughing. Some of the stuff they were doing was pretty amazing. They had the whole what they call it, so kind of similar to what's going on today, but not as, I'd say not as violent. They were doing the whole cop watching thing where they would pile in a car with their firearms, and if they saw a police officer pull somebody over, they would get out of the car, not threaten them or anything, but just kind of stand there and watch with the loaded firearms. So the police officers were like, "What in the hell is going on?" And it's like, yeah, oh, look at you guys using your right to carry firearms openly and do your thing. It was pretty amazing. I watched that movie back in way long ago that they wrote about that, and probably didn't get the whole context to it when I watched it back then. And it's kind of fun to listen to it and think about it now, because these guys really. So it was about 1967. 30 members of the Black Panthers protested on the steps of the California State House, armed with 357 Magnums, 12-gauge shotguns, and 45 caliber pistols. They announced the time has come for Black people to arm themselves. So here's where the racism piece kind of comes into it. So, from my understanding, back in that time frame, guns weren't a huge thing for people. And again, I was born in 69, so gun rights weren't a thing for me in 69 or 67. Wasn't quite my full of wax quite, as everyone knows I'm young and delicate. So so from an article I read, this display so frightened politicians, including California Governor Ronald Reagan. They helped pass the Mulford Act. I had never even heard of this before. So it was a state bill prohibiting the open carry of loaded firearms, along with an addendum prohibited loaded firearms in the state capital. In 1967, this bill took California down the path to having some of the strictest gun laws in America and helped jumpstart a surge of national gun control restrictions. That's crazy. So here's a whole, people own guns, perfectly legal. People were probably carrying guns around. But because the Black Panthers, an African American group, and people like Malcolm X started talking open violence almost, and hey, time to restrict guns, I would say that is pretty racist. Here they are. No white people were really affected by this, but as soon as Black people started standing up for their rights, they shut it down pretty quick by passing that Mulford Act. I was not even aware that act existed. Had you ever heard that before, Mary? So yeah, so what I was kind of hitting on was the them passing that Mulford Act, which, like I said, I'd never heard of and really didn't contemplate it when I was watching the movie and stuff about the Black Panthers and Huey Newton and all those guys. So there was a gentleman, Adam Winkler, and he said that was a whole part of a wave of laws that were passed in the late 60s regulating guns. And he said, especially to target African Americans, he wrote a book called Gunfight, The Battle Over the Rights to Bear Arms. And he talks about including the Gun Control Act of 68, which adopted new laws prohibiting certain people from owning guns, providing for beefed up and licensing, and inspection of gun dealers, and restricting the importation of cheap Saturday night special pocket pistols that were popular in urban communities. So here's one, I look at this as probably, again, back to the racism thing. They were trying to keep African Americans from accessing firearms at the time, and probably poor white people who were willing to stand up on their side. And look, if we knock out these cheap guns, who's using these cheap guns? People in the inner city, poor people, African American people, and anyone else who, at that time, who might have been rioting or standing up for their rights. So very interesting, because I know the Black Panthers, I know even though they were kind of African American centralized, I believe they spread their message to pretty much anyone in the inner city and took care of people. And, it is really interesting. So a whole new light for me to see some of this stuff and study up on it a little bit more. That's funny because even the NRA at that time jumped in on this, and they were all about gun control and limiting stuff. And I was like, holy cow, that had to be the first and only time the NRA jumped in and jumped on that boat. But I've read some stuff where people are talking about the NRA. The only reason they ended up jumping on board with that and then finally switching their mind was, if they can take guns away from inner city people, what's going to stop them from coming out here to the country and limiting our rights and other people? So that kind of got turned on them eventually. And, that's, I think, when they probably started taking a little more hardcore look at, hey, let's defend rights for all people. Yeah, that's wacky that they would have jumped in on that. So bizarre. So racism or public safety issue? Was it a public safety issue? That's why they shut it down, because we had armed people on the steps of a Capitol building? Or again, was it back to, hey, these African American guys are getting out of hand and we can't have that, and this is the only way we control them? Any thought?
I'm thinking it's the only way they can control them.
You know what? I blatantly racism to me.
Yeah.
I am not somebody who will quickly jump on. It's a racism thing. But
Uh-huh.
I tend to hold my judgment on most things. Most of these things I'm seeing right now, I tend to hold my judgment on. But man, the more I go back and look at some of this stuff, I just go,
Yeah.
holy cow, that was absolutely blatantly,
Right.
kind of a racist way to control a population that they were feeling
Mhm.
threatened by. Bizarro, man.
Yeah.
So there's some other articles I was looking at during this week. There was one from, so this one comes from the Atlantic Voice, and it was titled, and I'm not familiar with the Atlanta Voice. I'm assuming this is just out of Atlanta, and I don't know what the spin is on their paper, if it's a kind of a left-leaning paper or right-leaning. I really don't know. So the headline to this one is, gun control historically has meant prohibiting blacks from owning one. Interesting. I was like, huh, that's very. So they start going into, so from the story directly, it says preventing gun ownership among blacks began at the beginning of the nation's history. Virginia was founded in 1624, but by 1640, blacks were prohibited from owning guns. Virginia enacted a statute that led to a total gun ban for free mulattoes, Negroes, and Indians. In 1712, the statute was revised, calling for a total ban for Negroes to prevent insurrections according to laws designed to disarm slaves, freedmen, and African Americans. So right from the get-go, I mean, we're going back to the beginning of this country. It's like,
Really?
what? That's insane. And again, I must have missed those days in history class, because I don't know that's something that we're taught a whole lot about. I mean, we start hearing about insurrections and rebellions later on,
Yeah.
but I don't know that we go that far into this in some of our history classes. So it's really bizarre. So in 1792, blacks were excluded from joining the militia, which was created under the Second Amendment. The militia was limited to able-bodied white men between 18 and 45. Which again, I guess that doesn't get in till later with Buffalo Soldiers and things like that. And baffling this week to see some of those, some of the statues that were erected to honor African American regiments. And again, because people don't know their history, they're defacing those and tearing them down.
Yes.
Baffling. I
It
saw
is.
one who they ripped down. Who wrote Don Quixote? So there was a statue of that gentleman, and the guy was basically a slave at one point, an indentured servant. They ripped down his statue. I think they're indiscriminately ripping down statues now. They've ripped down multiple statues of people who were either slaves or fought for slave rights.
Yeah.
So again, it's a mob mentality, and it's kind of terrifying. So it's really bizarre, and I see a lot of people just jumping on board who probably have zero idea what the heck they're even getting into. But anyways, back to the article. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked, and I probably will several times over this. So 1882, Florida said free blacks could carry guns if they had court permission. It wasn't until the Civil War that black men who fought for the Union Army were free to carry guns. So listen, 1828 and now, so we're back, even back then versus now, we still haven't come far enough to where everyone is a, like Ohio, if you pass a background check, you get a license. Back then, it sounded like they were going through the same crap if you were African American or black. That's, you would have thought by now we would have had stuff changed up, but
right.
I would assume that, if a sheriff wanted to, they could probably pretty easily decide, hey, we're going to come up with a reason that we don't want you to have a gun. And I don't know that probably doesn't happen in some places. So crazy, man. 1968, of course, we had the Gun Control Act, and that I think that probably stemmed directly from the stuff that was coming out of California at the time. I'm sure that a lot of it got blamed. Kennedy got shot, and everyone, oh, hey, let's some of it comes out of that kind of stuff. But
The combination at the time.
a little too close to the that Mulford Act coming out of California. So I'm gonna go with it was more of a national thing to try to. Again, you had the FBI looking into the Black Panthers. You had all the alphabet agencies were tracking them and watching them and infiltrating them. I've read a few stories where they put agitators inside the organization and we're giving them guns to distribute inside the organization is kind of a setup. So it's I think what's his face, Huey Newton ended up in prison, right? If I remember correctly. And Bobby Seals, if I remember, was it Bobby Seals? Is that his name? I'm blanking. But yeah, I think those guys probably got some pretty chumped up charges and end up, again, there's a balance here. How hard do you push back? And do you push back if you can't get it through peaceful protest? Where's that fine line? And when does starting to hurt people who didn't deserve to be hurt or weren't part of any type of thing against you, which we're seeing a lot of right now. And I read story after story where, again, total side jump, African-American businesses being trashed these fights. And I'm like, they are destroying the very businesses that people are. So I had a little conversation with an acquaintance who I will go out and say she's a commie. And her whole argument was, John, the products can be replaced. They'll get insurance. And my argument was, does insurance always cover things like insurrection and acts of war and terrorism and vandalism like that under?
I don't believe it does.
It depends on the policy, I think. I know a lot of them, I think, don't. So again, I need to dig a little deeper in that. And here's the other thing, and Marion, you probably have a pretty good grasp on this, or even better than I do. How long does it take you to get an insurance claim to, you're going through a roof issue? How long does it take for insurance to get back to you?
Well, we were lucky. Our insurance company turned it around pretty quickly, but
that's awesome.
My boss, her daughter, had the same thing happen, and she's got a newer house, and they're having a terrible time, trying to get the claim done.
Yeah, and if you're a new business owner and you've just dumped your entire life investment into something, and you're not getting your product back that was stolen, broken for 30, 60, 90 days, your income flow, holy cow.
Yeah.
And, I relayed to this person. I said, listen, I used to run a car lot, and we had a person screw us out of a transmission job almost from the get-go. I mean, we're literally on the job a month, and it was like $1,200 out of our pockets. And I was like, that hurt, for us to recover from that. Now you got a brand new business owner who lost everything.
Yeah.
Their argument is still, hey, it's for the cause and they're going to get their insurance money. And I'm like, what? You are fighting for working class people, yet you're destroying working class people's stuff. What in the hell is going on?
Yeah, so, it doesn't make sense.
I was like, listen, you are a young white person who is protesting on the behalf of people of color, but you're destroying the companies and businesses of the people of color in their homes and their neighborhoods. You are as much a racist as anyone that they're fighting against. I was like, you are, it just got me so angry. I was like, you are using your little communist, agenda to ruin other people's lives who you're supposedly protesting for. But what do I know? That's a different, that could be a whole show into itself. I'll stop.
It could be.
Oh gosh, nuts. So 1994, kind of back to this Atlanta Voice thing, and things they're pointing out is probably racist legislation. The Clinton administration introduced House Resolution 3838 to ban guns in federal public housing, which would have affected 3 million individuals. Luckily, the House Banking Committee rejected the legislation. So here they're going directly after public housing. Now, I don't know the statistics on public housing, but I'm going to guess it leans heavier towards people of color. Just my guess. I don't know that for sure, and that might be a racist assumption on my side, but that to me sounds like the Clinton administration was going after people of color and minorities at that point, and trying to shut that down. And I'm sure they were probably trying to do it around, gang violence and stuff. But if you shut down the access to firearms to people in a gang infested area, do you not just give the gangs kind of control at that point? I mean, I can't imagine the gangs are going to be the ones going, hey, we're going to hand our guns back because you passed House
Right.
Resolution 3838. I'm just guessing they're not the ones showing up with the gun buyback program. Just
Nah.
me. So there were some southern states, according to this article, that imposed higher taxes and, again, banned inexpensive guns. Again, the feeling of this writer was it was going to price blacks out of the market. And again, one more racist type legislation that came in. So that's crazy. These are just things that, middle class white dude, just things that aren't my world every day. And I guess some of this protesting is good because it's bringing this kind of stuff to the forefront and makes me think about it. And please don't anyone take that as John supports the terrorist rioters. No, John 100% backs protest, 100%. Because listen, you can't support the Second Amendment and then try to rip people's First Amendment away.
Right.
This is where I freak out, is when the protests start turning violent and, again, start burning stuff and breaking stuff that doesn't belong to you. And I understand their argument is, listen, we've peacefully protested for how long? And now this is the only way we're going to get attention. So I really I want to try to get some people on the show who are doing the protesting and stuff and get some insight on this, because, again, it's not something I understand and it's not something I've had to fight or live through. So I would like to get that perspective a little bit more and see get some different opinions on it. So we'll see. Anyways, I'm trying to think, were there Mary, did you get to read any of those articles or anything that kind of made you go, oh, huh, that's interesting?
No, I didn't. But
there was a lot. I dumped a lot of information at you guys kind of late, didn't I? I was like, oh,
yeah,
look at
I
all
had a
these.
busy day today, so I didn't have time to look at it.
Yeah.
But
I'm not going to lie. I was like you. I've been so overwhelmed with some of the information
yeah,
and the news that this, to me, was a very hard topic to dive into. I literally kept pushing this off and pushing this off. It was again, my delicate flower. This was overload for me. I was really, between the news and trying to research this, I was just like, I am overwhelmed by this. It was crazy.
it is, because then on the other hand, you've got these people of color. There's the gangs, and they've got guns. And I don't know if you heard about the shooting in Akron last weekend, where
was that with the daughter and the mom were sitting in the car? And
yes,
was that in Akron?
the 17-year-old shot her. Like,
is he still on the run? Did they found two of them, right?
I don't know if they got him yet or not, but where did he get the gun?
Not at a gun store, I guarantee.
Yeah. So I just have trouble wrapping my hands around it,
Yeah, I mean, you see stories of 14, 15-year-old kids in some of these gangs, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's just like, what is happening in their life that you go, man, you 14 years old and you turn to a gun to rob people, and it's like, what? Again, nothing I'll ever understand, because I've not had to live in like public housing. I've never had to live. Again, I grew up in a trailer park, but that's still nowhere near what you see, in some of these gang infested areas. It's like, what? Poor people, man.
Yeah, it's just, and like Akron, it's getting worse and worse here too.
How close are you to Akron, Mary? Are you fairly close?
About Works 20, probably about 15 miles.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Candy has talked about being,
she's
like,
right
listen,
in.
I live in Akron. She's like, listen, I will not disarm. I was like,
He is not in a good area at all.
That's what she said. And it's, that's crazy. So yeah, I want to, hopefully she can listen to some of what we talked about and get her perspective and spin that as either a part 2 or have her tag on to the end of this.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I shake my head.
Yep, it's nuts, man. But I can totally see. So there's a bunch of articles that I will stick these in the links in the show, and people can read up on some of this stuff. I'm just baffled at some of the stuff I'm reading and how many times they literally, there was this whole the whole black code and stuff after the Jim Crow laws and stuff that just, hey, if you're African American, you absolutely can't own a gun. If we see you on a horse with a gun, we will shoot you. And it was legal. I'm like, well, what? That's That's insane to me. And,
It is.
I know some people make the argument was that was normal at that time, John, and, it was just how they were. Still a human being. I mean, it's just, and I understand that they probably didn't see African Americans and slaves and stuff as human beings. And, America wasn't the only place slavery was going on. So slavery was kind of it was almost an accepted thing around the world at that time. The Barbary pirates were snatching people,
Yeah.
right? The Irish were sold into slavery. How many Chinese people were sold into slavery that came here? And yeah, minorities have really been kind of crapped on in this country for a long time. It's crazy. I think the only time I hear minorities and guns and it doesn't get criticized is roof Koreans. That's about the only term where people look at, the roof Koreans are almost held up as gods in the gun community.
Yeah.
And if people aren't familiar with what that was, just type in the term roof Korean and do some reading around the Rodney King riots from back in the day. There was a whole community that got up on the roof of their businesses and basically fought people off, and their businesses survived. So it was, I think you might start seeing more of that going on as these protests continue. There's the poor girl that runs Colossal Cupcake downtown. So she's been working with the FBI to try to identify who busted up her store and some of the stores downtown. And they're threatening her. They're like, listen, don't you try to open, we'll burn your business down. And, why you, the whole don't snitch, snitches get stitches thing. So she's been getting all kinds of threats. Yeah, and I jokingly posted to Facebook tonight was if this keeps up, Chamber of Commerce is going to have a whole different meaning.
Really?
It's like, oh, that made me laugh. I made it funny. Look at me. You got the guys at Corbo's who were armed to the hilt and kept those people from coming in during that time. But again, I don't want to see protests turn into like outright gun wars. This is going to get crazy. If this stuff doesn't simmer down, man, it's gonna go into full blown just war. And there's a great article today. This isn't a, people are talking civil war.
Yes.
This isn't going to be a civil war like we thought North and South. This is going to be, you don't know who is on whose side and who's going to be switching affiliation because it serves them this week. There's not going to be uniforms. It's going to be a real, some of this is going to come down to class. Some of it's going to come down to race. I am terrified. I mean, I really, for the first time when people have talked about civil war, that I've been like, this could really kick off this summer and terrifies me. I am just absolutely appalled at what's going on with this stuff. So hopefully somebody figures it out and bigger brains than mine can make some sense of it and bring people together. And terrifying, man. Terrifying.
It is.
So you seen anything else with these topics or anything else that kind of makes you shake your head and go, what in the heck am I seeing this week? So I think kind of along these lines, not quite the same. So the Supreme Court, right? It's how many cases did they look at? Well, I should say did not look at and turned down last week. Did you see this?
Yeah, I did.
Was it 10 cases?
I think it was 10.
That's insane. So this is a court that's supposed to be a conservative court?
Right. You didn't want to touch it.
Right. I was, one of those 10, you're not going to take on any of this. I wonder if that's not part of it. And I wonder if it wasn't John Roberts who, that guy has not been, he's supposed to be a conservative judge. But he is definitely, when it comes to gun control, he has not been very friendly. So
no, hands off.
Yeah, it's been nuts. I really thought they would take up one or two of these, but they really didn't. So I pulled an article from Bearing Arms. Their whole thing was the Supreme Court dealt a serious blow to the future of Second Amendment litigation on Monday morning by rejecting nearly a dozen Second Amendment related cases they'd be considering in conference for recent weeks. Despite 4 justices announcing in the challenge to a New York City gun law that was mooted by the High Court, that when they wanted and were ready to hear one of the many 2A court pending cases, it took them all to the table. So one of the cases, so here's some of the cases. Let me back up. Some of the cases they were looking or thought about looking at was Pena versus Horan. So California, since 2012, 13-ish, so they've got this they've got this registry of guns that you're allowed to have and own and all that good stuff. So since 2012, 2013, they have not added any guns to this because they passed that micro-stamping law. Are you familiar with that one, Marion?
Hang on, I had to unmute.
That's okay. No problem. Yeah, mute, unmute. Good call. So this Pena versus Horan goes back to not being able to add any guns to that registry that they have, or that list of guns you're going to own. But the problem is no new guns can be added to it because they passed that micro-stamping law.
They're all going now.
So are you familiar with the micro-stamping stuff that they passed in California?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
So my understanding is that in California now, if you want a gun to be put on that registry, it has to have micro-stamping abilities. So what that basically says is that every time you fire a cartridge, there has to be a way for that gun to mark the case with the whatever gun it was fired from. So it stamps each case every time you fire a round. Holy cow, that is crazy. So they can't add any new guns because none of the manufacturers are doing this. That whole fight there is, how do we get around this type of thing, and how do we get new handguns added, and how do we carry guns in California? So it's a hot mess.
That's pretty stupid.
Yeah. Excellent point. Yes, that is pretty stupid. That's we'll put that right in with Joe Biden. That's pretty stupid.
Yeah.
So another one that they passed on was Warman versus Healy. So this has to do with Massachusetts, and Massachusetts really controlling guns and their assault weapons ban. So this is, they were really hoping the court would take this one up to finally say, listen, Second Amendment is Second Amendment is Second Amendment. You can't pick and choose what guns are going to fall under the Second Amendment, what people can have and carry. So, yeah, I think a lot of people were disappointed on that one because that was going to hopefully crush some of that. And then there were three that were all out of Jersey. So this Rogers versus Grewell, Cheeseman versus, I think it's Polillo, and Sielek versus New Jersey. This has all to do with justifiable need requirements. So in Jersey, there are another ones that you really got to jump through hoops and prove why. So there was a guy who's a business owner who works with ATMs in one of these cases, and his thing was, listen, I'm carrying huge amounts of cash, and you're not going to give me a concealed handgun license, even though this business, that prudent man thing would say, hey, I probably should have a gun in this situation. And of course, New Jersey says, nope, kiss our tush. You are a peasant. You can't have anything unless we say so. So I think that was a big one they really wanted to have looked at. And then just Malpaso versus Pelosi, not Pelosi. This is another one out of Maryland where it takes on similar requirements of, justifying why you need the gun. So these are some really good cases and baffling.
Yeah, they are.
And then Culp versus Raul. This is challenging Illinois' law barring residents from 45 other states from applying for a non-resident concealed handgun license. So many states have that now that, hey, if you're from out of state and you have a license from another state, that you can apply here. And of course, good old Illinois is, nope, love you. And then they have another one, Wilson versus Cook County, which takes on Illinois County's ban on modern sporting rifles. This is another one. Hey, Second Amendment says we can have it. And Illinois is like, no, you can't. Nice try. So that's nuts. And then Mans versus Barr. This was a ban on interstate sales of handguns. And I have to dig in. I didn't read this one as closely, but I assume that has to do with, hey, I can sell you a gun from wherever, whenever type of situation. But again, not real clear on that one.
They dismiss this, that it goes nowhere, or
they've kicked it. So the way that my understanding of it is, since they didn't take it on, it kicks it back to the states, and the states and the lower courts. Okay. The lower courts mostly so get to make and man, we know that stuff that ends up in, is it 8th Circuit out in California? We lose. Right. It's that simple. When stuff ends up in that lower court, we are just kind of screwed when it comes to Second Amendment and most rights that are kind of, freedom based. we don't win anything. Clarence Thomas and Kavanaugh wrote, this was like a 19-page dissent on this thing. And it was mostly geared at Rogers versus Grewal. And they really ripped into the other justices for not hearing the case. At least hear it in at least one of the 10 or 12, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And one of the quotes was, it appears that a handful of states throughout the country prohibits citizens from carrying arms in public unless they can establish good cause or justifiable need for doing so. The majority of states, while regulating the carry of arms to varying degrees, have not imposed such a restriction, which amounts to a ban on the ability of most citizens to exercise an enumerated right. So, yeah, that's, I want to go in and read the whole opinion. For them to put up 19 pages, and that's probably a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, but their whole thing was good cause and justifiable need should not be a thing, especially
Yeah.
Heller passed. We kind of got rid of all that crap, and
Right.
Heller says, hey, Second Amendment, carry your gun, carry your gun. I'm baffled. We'll see what happens and if they take it back up, but I can't imagine that you're going to come back to this anytime soon. So we'll see. We shall see. Any other weird cases out there that you're aware of, Marion? I haven't seen anything lately, and we'll have to see what
No, nothing that I've seen.
But yeah, that's we've got a fight on our hands to continue. So if you're not part of some national organization or NRA, was it ILA or
Second Amendment group?
Second Amendment group, local Buckeye Firearms, Ohio Institute Field Carry. Get involved with those groups because they're the ones out there kind of doing the
fighting our battle.
Yeah, they're the ones who end up getting these cases in the courts a lot of times and paying some of their attorney fees and putting people out there to sending people down to Columbus to be witnesses and stuff and talk to the legislators. So put your $25 towards, don't drink coffee for a day or two or miss a Starbucks. Cup of Starbucks is about $25. Skip that one cup and put it towards some of these local organizations. So I know a lot of people are pissed off the NRA right now, but they're still the big boys on the block. Or if
they are.
You don't like them, like Marion said, go to Second Amendment. But give me the Second Amendment groups. No, Second Amendment Foundation. Second Amendment Foundation. I am gotta stop drinking during these shows. Get your money, pick up your phone and call your legislators. It is so easy to contact those offices now. Whether they actually listen to you or not, a whole other story. But you can email them, you can call them, you can do just, but some of them take text now. Jump on their website and see what they got going on and pound on them a little bit and find out what their stance really is. Even though DeWine was a Republican back in the day when, the assault ban and stuff came up, I sent him a bunch of stuff and he replied. Somebody in his office replied, and at least they said why they were doing it, and I got the response. So I was happy to see they were actually listening and responding. Wasn't happy with the outcome or how they talked about it, but it was a thing. So all right, Miss Marion, I think that's about all I sent out to cover this week. Hopefully I can get Candy and Travis and Ben to maybe jump in towards the end of this thing, and I'll try to piece some more of this together and see what happens. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, not for today.
What's Well-Armed Woman? When's the next one?
Our next one is July, I think it's the 7th.
Oh, look at you guys celebrating freedom right after the 4th of July weekend. I love it.
You got that right.
What are you guys doing at this one?
It's the 7th, 6 to 8. I'm not sure what we're doing yet.
Oh.
We're still, with all this COVID going on, we're not back in sync yet.
Nobody is. This is
crazy. It's basically, we're not really having like a meeting. We're just kind of shooting for a couple hours.
Oh, nothing wrong with that.
And, talking. I think the last meeting we had maybe 10 show up. So,
are you guys the closest to like Northeast Ohio? Are there any up this way? Well-Armed Woman chapters?
I don't know.
I think you guys might be the closest. So I'm getting a lot of people asking me, especially females, and I'm kind of guiding them towards you guys. So.
I think there is one up in not Cleveland, but up farther, I think.
Okay.
You have to get on the map and look.
Yeah,
but they are I think it's already built, a new range in Akron. It's called Point Blank.
What is it? Point
Blank.
Oh, the franchise, because there is one up here in Menor. There's like Cincinnati, Kentucky,
and there's one in Akron. I went by there the other day, and it looks like they're about ready to open.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they have a pretty nice store up this way.
They're
a little expensive. I'm finding their stuff.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah. and again, it's a chain, so I tend to stick with some of the smaller local guys, but that's just
Right.
me. I'll pay extra money to go to a small local guy, but I don't like to spend extra money to go to a chain like that. That's just, again, that's me. I'm a stubborn ass, but what can I tell you? So awesome. All right, young lady. Hopefully we will catch up to you sometime next week for the show, and we will again try to get everyone else's thoughts before we print this or go to the podcast next Monday.
All right. Sounds
Appreciate you
good.
guys. Thank you, Marion. I always
All right.
appreciate your input. You rock and roll. I
Have a
do
good
love
week.
having it. You too, young lady. God bless everyone, and we'll see you next week on Protect You Radio.
All right. Good night.
See you, Marion.